Hello, Coolman229 here, another Topic of the Week video, and this week I'll be discussing the parallel narratives between Aang and Zuko in Avatar The Last Airbender, and Korra's own relationships with her villains. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr user mademoiseli, and her topic is the parallel narratives of Aang and Zuko in Avatar The Last Airbender. Maybe as a side note, you could talk about how a similar parallel between Korra and her villains is lacking in Legend of Korra. Now, first I want to talk about Aang and Zuko. Aang and Zuko both have their own storylines throughout all three seasons of Avatar The Last Airbender. Aang being the main character who ultimately has the most important goal of learning the elements and defeating the Fire Lord, he has his own storyline going on throughout the show. But funnily enough, Zuko, who's introduced mainly as our primary antagonist, has his own storyline going throughout the entire show. When he starts off as a douchey, just nasty person, but from the very beginning, once you actually start learning about his character, you find out that he was wrongfully banished by his father after being disfigured by his father publicly, and all he's trying to do is just get back to his home country and be accepted by his father. His search for honor, as much as people make jokes about it. I mean, it's sad. And you can really feel for Zuko's character. And they did a really good job of making Zuko sympathetic, despite the fact that he makes so many mistakes. Oh my gosh, don't even get me started on the mistakes Zuko made. But ultimately, he suffers consequences for his mistakes, learns from them, and becomes a better person. So, by the end of Book 3, he is so different, and you get to see him grow over the course of 3 seasons, which is one of the reasons why he's such an immensely popular character. You get to go on this journey not only with the main characters, but with Zuko as well, who has even more drastic character development, considering the fact that he started off as a villain. Though I wouldn't really consider him an outright villain, more so an antagonist, because he's not like Azula. Azula is crazy, as Iroh said, she's crazy and she needs to go down. He's more of a villain out of circumstances rather than his own personal desire. Because if he didn't have any issue with, his banishment, he really wouldn't be going out and doing all this horrible stuff. It's just that he'd become so desperate, so darn desperate for the acceptance of his father and having his banishment lifted after, something stupid like speaking out of turn. Like, okay, yeah, he spoke out of turn trying to, stick up for the lives of their soldiers, and they're like, well, you know what? And then Ozai's like, I'm going to burn half your face off and then banish you. And then he sends him on what he knows is a wild goose chase of finding the Avatar. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's not hard at all to feel sorry for Zuko. So, we already have sympathy for the main characters. They're the main characters. They're the good guys. But with Zuko, they really crafted a very interesting parallel story. And it really becomes far more interesting when you find out that not only is Zuko descended from Sozin, he's also descended from Avatar Roku on his mother's side. So that ties him and Aang together, and then, because you have, even, going back to, Book 1, you have all these, interactions between Zuko and Aang. And one of my favorite instances is when Zuko goes and rescues Aang as the Blue Spirit, and then ultimately Aang ends up helping him, and we have this nice moment, and this all leads up to a nice moment where Aang is like, basically, if things turned out differently, do you think we could have been friends? And it's just like, oh, wow. So the show never treated Zuko as pure evil, not like Azula and Ozai. And even Azula, in the end of the show, you can sympathize with her situation, being stuck underneath a psychopath like Ozai, and how he poisoned her mind, and it eventually drove her crazy because she'd become a control freak, and after she lost control, she just lost it. So you can so it's really interesting to see Zuko's character arc go alongside Aang's, who's the main character, and their relationship ultimately is one of the most interesting friendships in the show, particularly when you get to the end of Book 3. And a lot of this, a lot of those parallel stories end up climaxing in in Aang's life-changing field trip with Zuko, where he and Zuko learn firebending from the dragons and learn the old styles. And this isn't just important to Zuko, it's also super important to Aang. Zuko gets to let go of his anger-driven firebending and use what's more pure firebending, or like what firebending should be. And then Aang ends up learning firebending, something he'd been having trouble for a very long time with. And this is ultimately the last step in terms of learning all the elements and preparing to go fight Ozai. So their character arcs are so important to each other, and it's really interesting to see how they play out. And you see that Zuko, from the very beginning, had this storyline going alongside Aang, who's the main character. Korra lacked this completely. And one of the main reasons why is because each of the villains in Legend of Korra are season-long villains. That's it. Once the season is done, they're not the villain anymore. Now, if you know what you're doing, then this isn't that bad. But one of the biggest problems with with Legend of Korra is that this doesn't allow any development for the villains, or this doesn't allow any... It really doesn't even allow any real plot lines to be done with them. Because you introduce, a lot of times these are fairly big concepts, like Amon, who's leading a non-bender revolution. And then after, book 1, he's done. He's dead. There's nothing to do with. Then you have Unalaq, who's just dumb. But, after book 2, he's done, he's gone. Then you have the Red Lotus, and you have Zahir, who's just so stupid and a freaking villain Sue, breaks all the rules of bending, and he's not even interesting at all. And he's done after book 3. And then you have Kuvira, who starts being a villain in book 4, and after that she's done. You can't develop these characters really alongside Korra when Korra's the only one who's still around. And there are numerous reasons why the whole, the way they structured this doesn't work. I think I may have mentioned this before in previous topic videos. But I've definitely talked about this on Tumblr, is because each villain doesn't get to develop, and they don't even get to do anything really. Because they're so restricted to being one season. Like, can you imagine if Amon at least had 2 seasons? If he came back in book 2, and, he tried to, he basically tried to go after Korra again? Or, what if we got to see development from Amon? What if he ultimately became redeemed? What if you found out that, he was being manipulated and being treated poorly in the same way that Zuko was? What if he had dark spirits behind? And talking about dark spirits, what if there was a dark spirit involved with manipulating Amon, and ultimately he had become corrupted by that? And then you see Amon develop into a much better character. And this is just an example of what they could have done. And it's far more interesting than having him killed off in a murder-suicide, which is still stupid as hell. And then you have Unalaq, who just, apart from coming out of nowhere, and the whole thing of he's Korra's uncle, and then just makes Korra royalty, I hate everything about Unalaq. I hate everything about Zahir. Kuvira is the only other character that really could have developed. And honestly, one thing I really love the idea of is that if you have Kuvira start off in book 2, where she's helping Korra out with her forces, with the Earth Kingdom forces, and then you show her basically suffer tragedies and setbacks and go through crap over the show over a couple seasons, and then ultimately she becomes a villain in the final season. That would have been really interesting if we actually got to see Kuvira. If you had Amon start off as a villain and start becoming a good person, you had Kuvira start off as a good guy, and then ultimately become a villain due to, circumstances outside of her control. Like maybe her family died during the non-bender revolution, or maybe there was something that will rise up in the Earth Kingdom, and something, I'm just spitballing ideas here. Just But what, her suffering tragedies, and we get to see Korra basically play off of Amon's character growth, and you see, Kuvira's, descendants into villainy. And it would be really interesting if we saw Kuvira and Korra be friends, or, at least work together, before she became a villain, so that when Kuvira is an actual villain, there's some sort of personal, connection, I know you. You're not this evil, and then she's just like, I have to do what I have to do, Korra. That would have been far more interesting. And I do have to say, and I've said this before, Kuvira and Amon are the only two characters, or the only two villains that are actually really interesting. I mean, even sub-villains like the Lieutenant in Book 1, it was interesting, particularly when you find out that, how heartbroken he was to find out that he'd been lied to by Amon. But when it comes to main villains, Amon and Kuvira are the most interesting ones, and had they stuck around for a good chunk of the show, and I understand that, had they written Book 1 better, and then they got 3 more seasons, and I would honestly just introduce Kuvira in Book 2, and you can have her descent into villainy, and have the show end up being a start of darkness for her. So you see this character that you at first would respect and adore, this powerful Earth Kingdom general, and then she becomes evil, and maybe straight up authoritarian, and starts her own totalitarian regime because she thinks that this is what she has to do to stop bad things from happening. And that would really give Korra a personal stake in the story, because that's another big problem with these villains, is that Korra never has a real personal stake in them. Except for Book 1. Even with Book 2, when technically it's like, oh, this is her uncle, there's nothing really personal with Korra in it. And that's the funniest thing about this, is that, you have literally her fighting her uncle, who's never mentioned before, and there's no... even her cousins, and there's no real emotion to this. There's no connection for Korra. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. Now, Amon really struck a chord with Korra because he had the power to remove the thing that she cared about the most, her bending. And that conflict, especially the internal conflict that Korra experienced, was one of the most interesting and well-written aspects of the show, until it was totally forgotten about. Like when Korra issues that challenge to Amon to hide the fact that she's terrified of losing her bending, and then Amon captures her, says, I could stop you, I could kill you, I could debend you, I could kill you right now, but all that would do is turn you into a martyr for people to rally behind. So I'm going to take care of you later. Showing that he had all of the power in this situation. And Korra broke down with Tenzin. And that was one of the... it was such a good moment. And you see, that level of personal, connection, that, this conflict with, Amon isn't just because he hates benders. No. It's personal. And if you developed that, and you actually had Korra try to, reason with Amon, using the politics and negotiation skills that she should have developed, you really could have developed an interesting personal dynamic between Amon and Korra. And maybe seeing Amon that maybe he's just too far gone. Maybe she could get to him. So there's a lot of interesting things that you could have done had Amon been given a personal story, and also you have a backstory that's not stupid, and Noah talk. And you actually give him an interesting backstory that really explained why he does what he does and why he has the powers he does. And really, if you cut down the villains to just be Amon and Kuvira, and maybe some other ones, you could really give Amon and Kuvira a nice, parallel narratives to Korra. And have Korra deal with very complex issues with her villains. With Amon, he has legitimate issues. But Korra never actually got to discuss this with him. And that's really something, I know in a show that features a lot of action, I want them to talk about stuff. But that's really kind of what Korra had that's what she lacked. And that's what Amon was basically challenging her with. He's got the negotiation. He's got the silver tongue. He's able to manipulate people and play politics. And Korra comes to Republic City ignorant. She's so ignorant. And she doesn't know politics. And you see this in early episodes, particularly when Tarlok is manipulating her. So having Korra develop in a way that lets her see things from his perspective and negotiate with him would have done wonders for her character. And not only would have been interesting with Amon's character to have him engage in this political discussion, but also been great for Korra. And then likewise with Korra with Kuvira, if you establish this friendship and you see that Korra tries to reason with someone who she had been friends with and she had worked with, because it's like imagine if Aang knew Zuko before he became the bad guy in book 1. Imagine him trying to talk to him about that. I mean, it would have been so interesting. And shoot, it would have been really neat if Korra talked to Aang about this, or even Roku. Oh my gosh, that would have been a fantastic parallel between Sozin and Roku, having Korra be friends with a military commander and who's in a position of leadership and who became corrupted over the years, and then have her basically try to save Kuvira from this from the darkness. And then you have, because she's trying to do what her job as the Avatar and bring peace, but she, again, she talks to Aang and she doesn't want to kill him, or she doesn't want to kill Kuvira, but she wants to, save her. And then she talks with Aang and Roku about this situation. And this really would have been a great way to, have these interesting things brought up from the previous Avatars. And ultimately, have Korra go on her own, have Korra be motivated to not only stop Kuvira, but to save her. In a lot of ways, the way Zuko or Aang wanted to save Zuko, Aang wanted to help Zuko. He never wanted to fight him. It was all Zuko starting that. And then you could have Aang relay the story of how he and Zuko used to be enemies, but they became the best of friends. And this really would have tied in a lot of aspects from the previous canon in, and really developed this, but in a different way, with Korra and Kuvira. And these are ideas, this is stuff that I've really come up with off the top of my head. There's so many interesting things you could really do with this. And it's such a shame that Korra lacked these narratives with her villains, and she lacked any real personal connection with them. And any sort of, development. It's, Unalak and Zahir and his Red Lotus gang, they were dumb villains, and you could cut them out without losing anything. But Amon and Kuvira were interesting villains. And I've always said this, that they both had the potential to be really good villains, but it was squandered. And, just going over some of these ideas, wow, I really love that, I just came up with this idea about, Korra and Kuvira starting off being friends, and, then Korra has to witness Kuvira fall into darkness, and then which relates to something that, which is actually something she can talk to Roku about and Aang about. And then her debating on how she's supposed to handle the situation, just like Aang debated how he was supposed to handle Ozai. Oh gosh, every time I end up talking about what the show could have done, it's always so, oh my gosh, it makes me wish that we got, we had better writers for Avatar, or better writers for Legend of Korra, because this could have been such a really good show. I really kind of think it's about it to talk about this. I wanted to be a little more concise with this topic, because I know there's a lot that I could have talked about. I could have rambled on about it a lot, but I want to make sure that I kept this fairly succinct. And I think I can do this. So I'm just gonna stop right here. So, if you want to submit a topic, you can comment below if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, you send me an ask and do topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure you're following the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And, thank you for watching.